Hello, we are excited today. We have a new Patreon guest joining us who just joined Patreon, and she is coming to us from Waterloo, Illinois, over the bridge from St. Louis. This is Lisa. Welcome.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, actually.
Is this your first time telling your story on a podcast?
I've told my story to my friends and, of course, my family, but this is the first time that I've said it kind of out loud to other people. So,
Yeah.
What
well,
compelled you to do it now?
um, actually, I can credit my husband. Uh, so uh, he is the one that decided about 2 years ago. He had pretty much had it with me being so sad about not knowing where my biological family came from, and he's an engineer, and he said, "I'm going to go at this way." And so he got two big poster boards and laid them out, and I had done DNA through Ancestry and 23andMe, and so we got some second cousin hits was the
Mm.
closest we got. And so he set out to build that tree, and he did.
Wow.
And we actually found my biological father, and we think we have found my biological mother, but I just can't. I just haven't had the intestinal fortitude to reach out to her yet. So it was my
She's
husband.
living. She's
Yeah,
alive that you know of.
she's still alive, and I
Did
I
you did
just
you reach out to your father?
we did. It was kind of funny actually because when my husband narrowed it down, we were sitting next to each other at we have a bar in our family room, and he said, there's a phone number. I go, just a phone number? He goes, yes. So we called it, and he answered, and got a very, very thick Kentucky accent because that's where all of my history is. Doesn't have anything to do with Indiana or Missouri. It's kind of funny. But so he said, uh, we told him we were just starting this journey and that we wanted to find out, he showed up. And so we were calling numbers, and he said, sure, I'll help you however you need, and we said, well, okay, since you're willing, we'll call you back. And I got off, and my palms were sweaty, and, so about 2 weeks later, we called, and my husband spoke because I just couldn't talk. And he said, my husband said, we think you're Lisa's father. And he says, well, that's okay.
Oh,
He said, why don't you come on down to Kentucky, and then we'll meet you. And I said, well, if we bring a DNA test, would you do it? He goes, sure, I'll do that. So we got in the car, only 3 hours away. We drove down there, the loveliest man and his wife. And he took the DNA test, and it came back 99.9999%. So he's a fantastic person, and I'm kind of building that relationship. It's
yeah.
kind of shocking, really. I go, 64 years of my life not knowing, and then suddenly just boom.
Did he
And
did he talk about your mother?
Yeah.
no, actually, he looked at me. He said, "Now, what year were you born?" I he was he was a minor league baseball player, and so he traveled,
This is
and
like Bull Durham.
Right.
yeah,
I was
a
thinking the
lot.
same thing, Bull Durham.
And he said he was honest. He said, I just don't remember,
Yeah.
and he actually played on the Cardinals professionally for a year
Oh,
in 1963, which was kind of exciting. And there's a book written about him, and I found all this out.
how
you know,
neat.
yeah, it's very neat. But he didn't really. He ended up. I think he had a fast life, if you will. And then when he met his now wife, he was like, "I'll do." I think he calmed way down, and became quite the family man. And I think that's the person I know now.
And so you have siblings through him?
I've met my one. I don't know if he's necessarily told anyone else other than that. He's got a daughter that I have not met. And
Okay.
actually he said, it's kind of funny because he said, well, about 15 years ago, someone else contacted me. So I have another half sister that I do not have her contact information. I mean, when we went down there, it was all so crazy that I didn't think to ask all the questions that I really wanted to, about contact information. And
Well,
so
there's
I
still
know
time, right?
oh yeah. He's in his 80s, but in great
Oh.
shape, and we keep in touch. So there's no reason we thought we'd go down and see him at the beginning of the summer, but he would rather we come down when he doesn't have to sit outside when it's so hot. So we're going to try to make a trip this fall. Maybe I'll have my questions then, so that's pretty exciting.
And
So,
you haven't found the mom. You're a little afraid.
Well, we found her. It's got to
Mhm.
be because of all the facts that my husband found. But I had so high level Catholic Charities handled my adoption. And
Mhm.
after my mother passed away, my adoptive father passed away in 2003, and my mother in 2012. And I couldn't have scripted a better family, loving, fantastic people. And so after my mother passed, I thought, well, I'm going to, there was a story, this sweet story about there was a baby boy in St. Louis, and my parents wanted a baby girl in Indiana. And so they switched us in 1958 was the story. Yeah. And it was not even close, but anyway, so I thought I'd contact Catholic Charities again. And I got a hold of a secretary. I think she had been there a long time and in Evansville, Indiana. And she said, well, fill out this form. And I said, okay, I'll fill this form out. And so she called me and she said, do you want me to try to contact your biological mother? And I said, sure. And so she did. And 2 days later, which I find it very hard to believe they found her in 2 days, but she called back and said, your biological mother doesn't want to speak to you. And it was like,
Oh.
I was devastated. I mean,
and when was this? What year was that?
2018.
Okay.
Oh.
Right. So I was like, I said, what about medical information? She said, well, and don't get me wrong, but I don't know how much the lady at Catholic Charities, I don't know how much I can believe what was made
Right.
up and what wasn't. But she said, I kept her on the phone long enough to find out that, after she gave you up, she married someone else and never told anyone and doesn't, she's with the same man and she's got a family and she just she doesn't want to go through that.
Right.
So, okay. I said, well, what about like medical information? She said, well, she was fine. I said,
What
she
does
said,
that mean?
well, it was fine. And I said,
At the moment.
okay. So I ended up filling out. Indiana has a form that you can fill out for non-identifying information. So I filled that form out, and I filled one out for Missouri. But right about that time, Missouri was going through the natural the original birth certificate law. It was great because I thought, oh, this is it, because I was born in Missouri, I was born in St. Louis. And so should be able to find out. So I was one of the first people that applied. And I remember the day it came in, and we're all, my daughters, I have a daughter and a son, and my daughter's, she's on the phone and we're opening it up. And I looked at it, and I don't know how I knew, I said, this is all fake. And they
Mm.
said, what? It had this information. It had my biological mother's name. It had my name that she had given me and all this stuff. I said, this still isn't right. And
How did you know
so
it wasn't right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a bizarre feeling I had.
Mhm.
So my daughter starts Googling the names, she's like on the phone, dude, because she lived in Kansas City at the time. And and I'm just saying, you're not going to find anything. Never found anything with this. Like the name was so unique that it was
Mm.
odd. So the next week, I called Catholic Charities in St. Louis and I got a hold of it was like divine intervention. I kid you not. Like I got a hold of a gentleman. He was getting ready to retire. He had worked at Catholic Charities for years and years and years. And he was actually in the basement of all the records. And he said, well, give me some information. And I gave him like my name and my adoptive name, and nothing came up. And he said, well, give me the date. So he went to the big book that they wrote down, and he pulled it and he said, I think I found it. And I said, is the name? And then I gave the name, and he said, no, that's not who it is. And he said, he said they specifically wrote in this book, it was an alias. And I said,
Uh-huh.
oh, so I was right all along about the whole made up thing. But he stood there, it's really emotional, and read to me the handwritten nurse notes of when my biological mother was in St. Louis. She gave birth to me at the old Furman Deloge hospital that was in downtown St. Louis in 58. And he wrote about, she talked to her roommate and she had a baby girl. And there was a little bit, I said, can you take a picture of that for me? He says, I can't. He said, I'd get in trouble if they even knew I was reading this to you. I said, what do you mean get in trouble? He said, I'm getting ready to retire and I think you deserve to know this, but I can't. And I was like,
Get in trouble. I mean, just think about that for a minute.
Right.
This is
Who
our
was gonna?
information. This is
No.
our lives. Anyway,
so what we eventually kind of put together was that she actually lived in Kentucky. When she got pregnant, she's totally Baptist. There was nothing Catholic at all.
Oh.
But she went up to Evansville, Indiana, because probably somebody said, if you want to give a baby up, go to Evansville. So she went to Catholic Charities in Evansville, and she said, keep my identity like out of it, and you can have this baby. So they made up a name for her, and they put her on a train to St. Louis Catholic Charities, and they put her up in it was called the Catherine Springer Home. It was a businesswoman's like college. So when she had me, that like 2 days later, she got back on the train and went back to Kentucky. And then for 30 days, I guess I was with Catholic Charities in St. Louis. And then they put me on a train. They did put me on a train. That part was true, to Evansville, and then alerted my parents, my adoptive parents, who lived in Linton, Indiana, which is kind of south of Indianapolis. And they came down and got me. And I grew up in Franklin, Indiana, which is about 20 miles south of Indianapolis.
I have a question. So when the woman at Catholic Charities who said she's been remarried, was it actually the real person, or was
Oh,
this
right.
true?
I don't know.
Because if they didn't have the right name,
Right.
or
How would they?
See, if my whole theory is, if she went up from Kentucky and went to that much trouble to hide her identity, how in the world did they find her to call her? I don't believe they called her. I don't believe they spoke to her at all. I don't think because they may not have even put down what her real name was.
right?
She
Right.
was in Kentucky, not even Indiana.
See,
So
I
I
wonder.
think.
I mean, I know you're
Yeah.
afraid, but have you read
Mhm.
The Girls Who Went Away? Because
yeah,
most
that's
of
my
these,
next one. I'm doing Primal Wound right now, and it's a
Getting through.
lot. It's like
but
a
with The
lot.
Girls Who Went Away, most of these
Yeah.
mothers want to meet their children. I mean, I think reaching out isn't a bad idea.
No, I don't directly you doing it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I actually have made contact with some biological cousins in Indiana, and they're like, let's get in the car and drive to Ohio. I mean,
Okay.
I'm going to, I just don't
yeah.
know I mean, there's a phone number and I just don't know. I don't know yet. There's just a lot with me, emotionally
Mm-hmm.
that I
We
just don't
understand that.
know
We
yet.
do. Yes. But just remember time is the
Right.
thief sometimes. It can be the
Mm-hmm.
thief, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's
And
true.
you don't want to regret. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I know with adoptees, it's a fear of rejection.
Yeah.
And she may, I don't know,
And you've had
I
that
don't know.
rejection. Listen, you already had it, even if it wasn't real. So, okay, you
Yeah.
survived that. You did it. It's like, all right, you were rejected. You're
Yep.
here. You're still digging in. So maybe the real mother.
I have every intention of doing that. I just don't know how yet, or,
Yeah, of course.
some people suggested, well, write her a letter. You have the address, and I just don't know how I feel about that waiting, like, for that
Mm-hmm. That's almost
response.
worse, right? The
I agree.
anticipation. Yeah.
Like one of your other adoptees said, just, I'd rather be cut now, like reject me now,
Stephen.
or
Yeah.
don't make me wait.
Don't make me
Yeah.
wait for the letter. Well,
Right.
Lisa,
So,
growing up, you had lovely parents. Did you have siblings? And how did you feel? Did you feel, because you said you were sad about not knowing. So even though you had a lovely family, I had that too. Were you still, how did you feel underneath?
I honestly think, though, although I adored my parents, it was almost like, not a parental relationship. It was almost like it felt like an aunt uncle, if that makes sense.
Mm,
It was like I was never really close to my mother, like I
mm.
wanted to be. And my
Had
dad was,
they tried to have children and couldn't?
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, they
So,
adopted they didn't get married till my father was a paratrooper in World War II,
Yeah.
and they didn't get married till after he came back. So he was already, that he was like 35 when they got married. And then they adopted my brother. Now, my brother was actually a Canadian. They actually went up to Quebec, which was unheard of. So I was born in 58. This was 52, I think. They went up there, and actually there was an orphanage. Word got out that there was this orphanage in Quebec, had 6-month-old babies. So they
Oh,
went up, they were like Johnny on the spot, went up there, brought him back, and he grew up. And they wanted a girl. And so they put their name back in the list, the Catholics. And that's when I think we would have taken a boy at the point, because they had been promised a baby, like, for 2 years. And finally, the boy supposedly, now that story might be true. I don't know. I don't have any confirmation of that, but there was supposedly a boy in Evansville that was ready for adoption, and I was in St. Louis. So they just pulled the whole switcheroo. And that's
hmm.
when,
what did they tell you about your adoption? And
well, Catholic Charities told my mom that, my mother was a 16-year-old unwed mother in St. Louis, and that she loved me so much she couldn't take care of me. And she,
blatant lie.
They just make up this. It's
oh
probably the
my
A
same
gosh,
story on
you
every
think?
blatant
baby.
lie.
Slap it all
I
on
Yeah.
that
mean,
But I
story.
mean, it wasn't even the right location.
no,
It's a
that
blatant
wasn't even
lie.
close. Blatant.
Mm-mm.
Like, totally. I mean, and I'm not trying to diss Evansville Catholic Charities, because this was in the 50s and they did whatever they wanted, I think.
Mhm.
And they just said,
A
oh
lot of
yeah,
power.
this was an unwed mother in St. Louis, and she did the right thing and gave you up. And I know. So it wasn't even close, because when I finally got the identifying information, my biological mother was 20. I mean,
Oh,
I don't know that she might have made that decision, which is something I'd like to ask her.
right.
How did you like make it up to Evansville, Indiana from where you were in Kentucky? Because all of my relatives, everything biological is in Kentucky.
Mm.
And
Mm.
sometimes these decisions, like, my biological mother was 19. She gave me up, but sort of it was her decision. You know what I'm saying? The decision is because she had no support. So 20, you could
Then
raise
it
a
was
baby, but you have no
so
support.
embarrassing.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, it was, nobody, they were embarrassed and they didn't want, how could you do that? Well, they were having sex then, they having sex now. I mean, it's like,
that's right.
I
I mean,
mean,
hormones know no era.
exactly.
You know?
We
Absolutely.
always, we're always like, hi, talk to your kids about sex, please.
Yes, because they're going to get urges. That is
I mean, it just
biology.
it's bizarre. But they made
I
up
know.
so many, like,
They
they just
do.
made this beautiful, and in a way I'm glad for my adoptive parents because they were diehard Catholics and that was their life, and they wanted a child so bad. And it was kind of funny because one of your other podcasts they were talking about, like, my brother was the crazy one. Like, if you take Frank Zappa and like, that was my brother. He ended up, his career was a disc jockey for the University of Eastern Tennessee at night. I
Oh,
mean,
cool.
smoke pot every day, just, rebel. And I came along, straight A's.
Yeah,
I did everything always to please everybody else. Like, you know, everything was about, are you happy with me? It
right.
seems like until lately, that's been my whole life, pleasing everybody else.
Hmm.
I
You
was going to ask that. Are you still like that? You said until lately. Funny how
no,
that can go
actually,
away in our older years.
I
So
mean,
going back to like you didn't you felt like your parents were aunts and uncles. So your place in this
Yeah.
family, did you have a relationship with your brother? What was he like with what
I
was
mean,
the
he
family
was,
dynamic?
he was so odd. I mean, he was so different and so crazy. We just didn't ever, like, even in later years, we would be in a restaurant and he would purposely say bizarre things to make me mad. I mean, it was so weird. We weren't close. We weren't, now he passed away
Oh,
a couple years ago, and we actually spent a week together. He was so sick, and he lived in Johnson City, Tennessee, and I went and spent a week with him, and I'm glad I did. We got kind of close, and we resolved any lingering, and he was so sweet to me. And all these years I thought I had it all figured out, and now I look back and I think he had it more, because he actually was
interesting.
contacted by his biological father up in Canada, who apparently fathered like 10 children all over Quebec.
Wow.
And he
Interesting.
never could. I said, well, aren't you going to contact him? He's like, no, why do I care? And I'm like, he goes, why do you want to know so bad? And I said, I don't know. I just do. So it just was never important to him. So we're,
And how was he with your parents?
listen, my parents didn't understand one bit of how he was. Like,
I mean,
he looked at,
that is a good indicator of how bizarre adoption is. This is this you're nobody's
Who is
you have
this
four
child?
genetic strangers in a house. It's so
exactly right. And I never, until listening to the podcast, because I went back to your first, I'm trying to work through everybody's,
Yeah.
and the whole stranger thing just is so spot on. And I never dawned on me, I never thought about that. But it's like we were roommates or something,
Yeah.
because it was so, he went to the University of Vincennes, and one night my parents, I could hear them outside and they were whispering, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, don't worry about it. Well, found out later, some undercover cops had come to his dorm room and wanted to buy some pot. And he said, well, I don't have any, but I can walk you across campus. So he walked him across campus and they arrested him for
Oh.
after the fact or before the fact. I don't remember.
Set up.
Okay, that's entrapment. I'm sorry, but
Yes, it is. But this is I don't know. It had to be like 73, 74. And he calls my 80-year-old grandmother, my dad's mother, who lived in Vincennes. And it's like, of course, she turned around and called my parents, and it's like they were like, what? He said, did you know your brother was doing drugs? And I said, well, yeah.
Everybody does. Drugs.
So you were the good, compliant, people-pleasing adoptee. And then
absolutely. Absolutely.
And did you ever tell them, like, if you wanted were interested in finding out your roots, did they give you guilt about that or any kind of?
I often wanted to, but it was like one time I think I said to my mom, you're not my real mom, or something like that. Because they always told me I was adopted, I was chosen, I was this, I was that. And the look on my mom's face was as if I'd have punched her in the stomach. And I just never, ever thought, ever would I do that to her again. I mean, it was gut wrenching. And I never went that path because I didn't want to hurt her. So there was no guilt.
Kept it in.
Other than the Catholic Church, they were guilting me, but.
Well, and just, I mean, kind of, because by virtue of the fact that you saw that look on her face, you're like, okay, I can't go down that road. So that's in essence some sort of guilt.
I had that. I mean, I said the same thing. I remember I came home from the pool. I remember when I said it, and you're not my real mom. You can't tell me. And the look, and it was
devastating.
I didn't bring it up for years. Yeah, it was the same. I did re-bring it up, but I did. I was a little bit of a rebel, but I did. But it was very scary. It was like, oh, I mean, I used it in anger, of course. So first of all, it's hurtful, but that's the conversations we have to have. Like nowadays, I hope when people listen that a parent would say, okay, you're angry. This is true. Let's talk about that. Do you have feelings about, that would have been the next proper step. But instead we all go to and then you shut down. You just like, oh, not doing that.
Then you go through your life, marriage, kids, and 2018.
Two divorces, because I've always had relationship issues.
Oh yeah.
Always. Hello. That's the stuff we could have known, right? Come on.
Yeah.
I accidentally stumbled into this third husband who's been the man has got patience of Job with me. I mean, we met at speed dating, if that tells you.
That's made a comeback, FYI.
Yeah, I've heard that. Seems to have worked for you.
I think that's really all I could handle at this point. So maybe I should give it a shot.
30
seconds. Dead. After that second divorce, I was like, no more. Because I was a confident woman, didn't, and then this funny engineer comes along and speed dating. He had like his shirt zipped up to here and nothing. And he ended up being a gift. He's just been fantastic. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have even found my biological father and possibly my mother. So.
And just the listening about all of this, right? That's part of it too, because people cloud over and get like, oh, this thing again. And
never ever says that.
No, being a partner in it. It's huge to have that support.
Someone's newly out of the fog and their spouse is like, this again.
That's what kids are. It's like, oh no. Let it go.
Let it go. Right. Okay, kept person. Thanks for your opinion.
And I will give my son credit. He's like, Mom, I'm happy for you, but you have to understand that my biological or my adoptive parents, that's my grandma and grandpa, and they
Yeah.
adored them. I mean, he just said, I just don't know if there's room in my life.
It's
I
hard
loved
for
them
them a
so
little bit.
much, right? And I got it, and
I
I
mean,
think
they're
that's
so
where I
still
was.
it's
like,
there,
it takes a minute,
Yeah,
they're not,
right?
it takes us sometimes. Look, it took
it does.
Louise and I to our 50s. Like, it might take them a little longer.
If they never do, I'm okay with that too. I get it.
It-
My
yeah.
parents were loving, fantastic. They were the best grandparents. I mean, I get it.
And the best aunt and uncle you could have asked for.
That's so funny.
That the last 10 years of my mother's life, I took care of her essentially,
Oh,
and uh, got to know her on kind of a different level. And there was this, it was funny because she and I had this underlying, she was very proper, everything was very proper. And so when I took care of her, she'd have this list of things that I had to pick up for her at the grocery store. And she kept putting toilet paper on the list. And finally one day I was like, she had a walker and I walked her into this room. I said, Mom, you have 30 sheets of toilet paper. I'm not buying it. I mean, it was this, the kids laughed because it was this loving, just, oh my God, Mom, you're kidding me. But I mean, I wouldn't have had it any other way. She actually gave up her home in Indiana to move by me here in Columbia, Illinois, which, she
mhm.
left all her friends, left everything she knew. And
But why all the toilet paper?
I don't know. Never did. The depression, I guess.
I was gonna say the
Run out of
depression after
toilet paper.
COVID, people do that too.
That's what
So
I
it's
was
not
thinking,
that
but this was
weird.
Well, she
pre-COVID,
died
but yeah.
in 2012, so she was way ahead of the game on
Yeah.
She
COVID.
was ahead
The
of the game,
toilet
and
paper.
my
She was
grandmother
stocking
Trendsetter, your
up.
always
mom.
had. My grandmother from the depression always had toilet paper, certain
Yep.
things.
Yep.
Never, you could open the closet and there was just certain staples in there, and I think that is from that. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I never approached her about it because I loved her too much, but it wasn't a mother-daughter love like I have with my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
it never was that. So, and now I understand it, but then I didn't. I wanted to be closer to her, but it just wasn't there, if that makes sense.
Of course. I felt that way for years watching my brother with my mom. Like, I was very close to my father, and I was close to my mom, like how you were. But I felt like, why can't I have that thing? And I didn't get it either. How did I not get it?
I
I
wonder,
don't know.
did they have, well, no, I guess there wasn't an immediate, I mean, maybe she still had infertility grief that she never
Well,
grappled with.
she never spoke of it. I mean, she just was so proper and everything, and she loved my father just like crazy. I mean, and if he just said it was his idea that you just don't talk about things, don't
Mm,
talk about it.
silent
Not gonna.
generation.
It
hmm
is.
And I
Yeah.
think if he'd have had her, if he just said hold a pile of poop in your hand, she'd have done it just because I mean, that was, and she loved it. She didn't want to make decisions. When he passed, she looked to me because she was like, I can't make a decision. He made
Um,
all the decisions in their marriage. And I'm like, God, Mom, and so I
And that
stepped
was that
in.
was their generation, right? They didn't
Mhm.
mm,
For
the
sure.
women just served men. That
mm.
was the purpose.
And and I don't know. I don't do a lot of serving myself, but
I will say my grandparents, adopted grandparents in St. Louis, my grandmother wore the pants. She was hardcore, but they got married late in their 30s, and she had had a little business, and yeah, but she was big on that, which I kind of appreciated growing up. I modeled after her a little bit. My mom was more the 50s conventional, you know, gave up a huge career, supported my dad, the whole thing.
of
That's how it
course,
worked,
had the
right?
children or adopted
Right.
them or whatever.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
had
Yeah.
one, adopted one. Yeah, I know, and didn't deal with
Ooh.
grief. There's a lot of,
I
it'd be
mean,
interesting to open that door with your mom, but it's hard, Some people don't want to.
Well,
I
her
don't know.
mom's
No.
no longer here, but I'm really hopefully you will find a way that you can reach out to your biological
Yeah.
mother and have that piece kind of final, I don't want to say finalized, but answered, if nothing else. If maybe if maybe she's waiting to hear from you. Who you
Yeah.
don't know.
I mean, I've had a lot going. I'm getting ready to retire, so I've got a lot going on in other areas of my life. But once that's kind of calmed down, then I think I will. I just I'm I just don't. I just haven't decided how yet. If I want to wait, if I want to write that letter, if I just want to pick up the phone and call, because there's a number. Now, whether it works or not, I don't know. But taking that first step, and I don't know. I've
Yeah.
always, before now, I always, and it goes back to putting everybody else first. My fear was always like, well, do I have the right to come into her
Right.
life? And I think I do. I mean,
Yes, of
you know,
course.
I I didn't before, but now it's like, why not? Like, all she can do
100%.
is hang up on me or say, "Who are you? I don't know what you're talking about," or but it's worth a try. You're right.
It's
It is.
absolutely worth a try. And since you are part of our Patreon, we'll get to hear about your journey and we'll be here for you and
Yeah,
can't wait for the next
Yeah.
chapter for you and happy for you with your father.
I
It's
Yeah.
am. I am. It's been it wasn't as completely fulfilling as I thought it would, but I suspect that's because of the mother issue still kind of
Yeah.
hanging out there. But I couldn't have asked for a more wonderful
I'm picturing like
relationship.
Tim Robbins, back in, in Bull Durham, like, welcome. How many of you are out there? Come on
I know.
in.
I
And it's a
mean,
nice plug for
never know.
fathers. A lot of people don't think about the father often. And then when they do, sometimes they really turn out to be the big surprise. Like we've had a lot
He
of fathers
definitely
be the
is.
real
And
welcomers.
yeah,
Yeah.
3 hours away kind of blows my mind that he's just been that close kind of the whole time. But
Did you feel like him genetically? I don't know if we asked that. Did you when you
yeah.
saw him? Oh, you
Well,
did.
my son, so when my son was born, he was the first person like distinctly remember saying,
Mhm.
"Oh my God, you look like me." I've never seen any because my adoptive parents didn't look
Right?
like me.
Of course, yeah.
And my crazy brother looked like Frank Zappa and like I can't remember the other person. He looked like a cross of the crazy killer. But anyway, I remember holding him saying, "Oh my God, you look just like me." And so as he's growing up, there are some traits about him that we don't see in me, we don't see in his father. And now we know because he looks just like my biological father did at his age.
Oh,
He's athletic, he's tall, strapping, and there are some cousins, like third, fourth cousins that look just like him on his age in the family tree. So that's
That's one of
been
the
cool.
most
yeah, it's
amazing
cool.
things about the discovery is seeing the
Uh,
mirror, that we lacked
Yes.
growing up.
you just can't get
And
over it, really. Yeah.
the immediate, and for example, I have a disease called Dupuytren's contracture
Huh?
that it's on your hand and it causes like John Elway has it if you follow
Oh,
football,
right. I do.
but it causes your fingers to contract,
Yeah.
and I'm actually having surgery next week for it. But first time I met my biological father, I said, "You don't have Dupuytren's by any chance?" He said, "Oh yeah, I sure do." I mean,
Oh,
oh my God, because it's definitely hereditary. It's like the
yeah.
Vikings disease, and
Right. Right.
I mean, it's stuff like that it's overwhelming almost that you just don't I had never experienced my whole life, you know? So it's
Another
been very
reason for the
cool.
mom side, right? To know a
Yeah.
little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
Yeah.
daughter for you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That would be the medical stuff would be great.
The medical stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, at a minimum, right? The medical stuff, under knowing what
mean,
we could face.
I mean,
is-
that's why, I've always, and I've told my daughter, always have your mammogram and have a
Mhm.
colonoscopy and have all these things and be careful because you have no idea unless you would do a DNA. They have them now. You can see what genes you have or
Yeah.
Yeah.
may have, but I've often told her, and I've done it myself because it's so unfair. I'm almost bitter about that aspect of it.
Mhm.
Mhm. Well, I
Don't
think
yeah.
many of us are, because those secrets that
Oh my goodness.
all the agencies kept could have prevented some deaths along the way. So,
I mean, the funny part is because some of the non-identifying information that they gave me about my biological mother, they said, "Oh, she's fine." Well, we had gotten this paper called Adoption Medical History, and this was on her intake. So it said she had a skull fracture in 1955, and she had pelvic inflammatory disease. And it's like, oh my God, these are things that every adoptee should absolutely know. This is like, I don't care what age you are.
Yeah.
That's just offensive,
Yeah.
totally.
that
Yeah.
it's secret to us. Well, why us? Of anybody, we should have it more than other people because they can go ask people. We can't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, needless to say, I'm a little aggressive about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yep,
Understood.
definitely. Well, this has been really it's good to hear this story. Just I like how you went into it with the father first. It was interesting to me.
Yeah. And keep us posted. We know you will. And
I absolutely will.
thanks
And
for
thanks
coming.
for everything you guys do. It's
Oh,
been ever since I found your podcast, it's been emotional, but it's been great. It's like I don't feel so alone anymore because
I'm
you can tell your friends I'm adopted and these things, but the only people I think that truly get it are the adoptees themselves.
Mhm.
yep.
And
100%.
I don't know anybody else. Like you're my first connections
Aw.
to adult adoptees, and I'm just so
Gosh. Oh, I'm glad you
thank
found
you.
us, and I'm glad you're
Yes.
part of our group and
Yep,
our new
I
friend.
am and
Yeah.
will remain so. So
And we
thanks.
mean
I
this, but
appreciate it.
reach out when you need to, because people do,
Mhm.
Oh, I
and they're
will.
like, "Oh, you wrote back, of course. Like this is our group too. You're,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
I think you guys are great, and I
thank
really
you.
appreciate one of my good friends said she listened, and it was like you have this camaraderie and this natural relationship that makes it comfortable for us. So thanks. I
Thank
do
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that.
Thanks for coming on today, and we'll see you soon.
See
We
you.
will see you soon.
Thanks. Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.